2013. We're here for the purpose of the Committee of the Whole. I'd ask that you all rise and join me in the Pledge of the Flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk Spencer, could you please call the roll?
Gutenkopf.
Here.
Deuter.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Polumsky. Absent. Bram.
Here.
Hipskin.
Here.
York.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Heimquist.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner. Absent. Wagner.
Here.
12 present, 2 absent.
12 present, 2 absent. We have a quorum. On to agenda item number 2, announcements. Are there any announcements this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on. Public comments. Clerk Spencer, has anybody signed up for public comment this evening?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We'll start with Victoria Ludkowski, 640 North Kenilworth.
Please approach the microphone. You have 3 minutes. And we ask that you give us your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Victoria Ludkowski. I live at 640 North Kenilworth Avenue, Elmhurst, Illinois, 60126. You knew that. I wanted to talk about the streets in North Elmhurst. Right now, they're really bumpy. I don't know if you've taken a drive up there, but you'll see that you have to kind of drive strategically to avoid the bumps. Pieces are sticking up, and the snowplow really obliterates these. I would like to ride my bicycle in the neighborhood, and there's so many bumps that it actually hurts my back because I'm always, bumping. However, over on Parker and 1 block south on Eastland, Van Auken, Belden to Lake, and the new Lake Street, those are great. I suggest that we continue to improve those streets throughout that whole neighborhood. Let's see. Yeah, I really think it's time to fix these roads. I've lived here for more than a couple decades, and especially now that we have Mariano's up there, I think it'll really work out well for all of us. Thank you.
Claude Pagash, 56. Oh,
Sorry, I thought she was coming up.
Claude Pagash, 566 West Gladys.
My name is Claude Pagach, live 566 West Gladys. I wish my alderman, Mr. Norm and Mr. Dunn, to propose a few ordinances for the city. 1, the district they represent will be put in a TIF. Any resident that moves into town will get a $5,000 rebate to help defray their costs for moving in. And every resident can hang on to their receipts from purchases in this town and present them to the city for a 60% rebate on that tax. For gentlemen, this is what the council does for the business community in this town. It gives them the rebates, puts them in a TIF. The residents are a captive audience. They can't leave. They gather a little money, put it down on a house, got a mortgage. Even if they sold their house, they couldn't get another residence. Just couldn't do it. And it's proved time and time again in this town because their houses flood and we use their basements as retention. And we're rather sad it happens, but we don't even pump them out. They go out and buy their own pumps. So basically what this council does is just hang on to the resident. He isn't going anywhere. So we load him up with taxes endlessly. he comes and pleads his case, he just pleads his case. Mr. York says there isn't enough money that's being collected in this budget to help abate any general obligation bonds. He says we'll have expenses. We surely are. Once that parking garage starts, and once you guys settle out on a guy in Han, and once this little issue of Industrial Drive gets settled out, yeah, we won't have much money. We'll have plenty of obligation bonds. You're going to pass this budget. There's no doubt about it. Mike and Miss Gutenoff can talk until the wee hours of the morning. There is absolutely nothing that is going to change, no matter how sound their argument. And the resident will pay. And he'll pay. And if he doesn't pay, the county will go to court. He'll get kicked out of his house. The city will come along and say, get your garbage off the parkway, or we'll do it. We care very little for him. Let alone the basis of this budget is based on, we will take care of the resident. Well, who do we take care of?
Mr. Pagash, you're at your 3 minutes. I'd ask that you wrap it up.
You pass ordinances for business. That parking garage, the residents will never park in because there won't be room for them.
Tamara Brenner, 137 North Caroline.
Tamara Brenner, 137 North Caroline. Regarding the Prairie Path underpass that's on tonight's agenda, I looked at attachment D. That's got some interesting information about it that all shows that there is no indication to be putting an underpass under York Road where the Prairie Path goes. The accident data, which is within 250 feet there, includes a couple of intersections, not just the Prairie Path. There's only 4 pedestrian incidents. They were all minor injuries. Only one person went to the hospital with a forehead laceration, which is unfortunate, but it's not a serious injury. So we don't know why these pedestrians and motor vehicles interacted. Was there distraction involved? Was anybody talking on their cell phone? There's things that can be done short of putting a big tunnel underneath the road. The data about the other crossings that exist in DuPage County, that was really interesting too. There's over 110 intersections of roads in the Prairie Path. 90 of the 110, actually I counted a total of 113, but I didn't double check my math. Maybe I'm off by 1 or 2. There was 90 of them at grade. 8 underpasses in the entire county out of 110 plus, and those are under major roads such as Illinois 53, Illinois 59, and I-88 at different places. There are also overpasses over some of those. The road gets crossed more than once, but there's only 8 underpasses, and none of them are on roads that are similar to York. I really would like for this thing to be pulled off the budget altogether. The $150,000-ish that's supposedly to be spent for preliminary engineering work should not be spent this year. You guys should reconsider this project and really pull it off the 5-year capital plan. Hopefully you'll do at least one of those things tonight. Thanks.
Ken Sarnick, 842 North Lombard Street.
Good evening. Like you said, Ken Sandrick, 842 North Lombard. I've been a resident of Illinois, of Elmhurst since 1969. I was there when they first put the streets in. Obviously, this is about the streets. The streets are all cracked up. My street, I live on a dead end. And when we first put it in, when you do a core sample, it wasn't even thick enough. But Palmer was in charge at the time, and he said that they were just going to leave it in there, and the contract company wasn't going to charge them for it, and Elmhurst would take care of it as they would any other street. Now, I got assessed for it. That didn't go away, but I think after all these years, since you're at a dead end, nobody cares about it. It's all cracked. Like the first lady spoke, you can't ride your bike on it. We don't have sidewalks, which is fine, but I think the streets, we should get our little share. They've been doing some of them with blacktop, and it really looks nice. That's all I got to say, and thank you, and happy Thanksgiving.
Ed Godfrey, 838 Lombard Street.
Ed Godfrey, 832 North Lombard Street. I'm again live on the same street as Ken does, and I asked about a year and a half ago about getting my street fixed because it looks like a bad case of varicose veins, and not only in front of my house but other parts on my street too. And they told me that they were going to be scheduled to blacktop the area. I was going to be scheduled for 2015. And as the First Lady said, they also, on Parker and one other street there, Geneva, they blacktop part of that. And just a block north of where they stopped blacktopping it, they replaced the concrete in there last year. I've got 3 or 4 different houses where they repaired the concrete, and I've got pictures that I can show you what the condition was before and afterwards. And there was no way near what my condition is, or other lots on my street. So I guess I'm perplexed that I get told I can't get my street fixed, but somebody right next to the blacktop gets their street fixed. So, thank you.
And last, I have Ron Abata, 267, is that East Fullerton? Read that.
Yes.
Yeah, Ron Abata, 267 East Fullerton Avenue. I live on the corners of Fullerton and Howard. That street is a disaster. It's been a disaster for 5-6 years. Every year, and whenever I come to a council, I constantly ask for that area to be fixed along with all the other streets. Only thing we do is get cold patch, cold patch, cold patch. Cold patch is not a permanent product, and you probably could have paved my street with the amount of money is putting in cold patch. It's a hazard to the children because it's also a school bus stop. And when I say that hole goes down 8, 9, 10 inches into the clay, that's not an exaggeration. I have picked up many a child that went in the bike, hit them holes, and landed on the curb. In short, this is North Elmhurst. Streets are terrible, but we should start getting our fair share of the money that's being spent in this town. I don't believe we're getting it. Thank you.
That concludes public forum as far as who signed in tonight, Mr.
Thank you, Clerk Spencer. Is anyone else at this time in the audience who did not have an opportunity to sign up for public forum that would wish to speak at this point? Seeing none, we'll move on. On to the business at hand. We are here hopefully to finalize discussion as it relates to our 2014 budget. Tonight we have our circle back items that city staff has provided to all of us with the hope that we will get through them tonight, ultimately for a formal vote on the budget on December 2nd. Is that correct, Jim?
That is correct.
Okay. Mr. Grabowski, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Mayor, as you indicated, there were a number of circle back items that we've come through. Staff has done their best to gather the information for each item, which was circulated to the council previous. So if you'd like, we can just go item by item, and if there's discussion and questions, handle it that way.
Yeah, sounds good.
First item was some police pension, fire pension levy numbers. I believe we provided that information that satisfies it.
Yes, so that just actually more accurately reflects what the finance department worked on, or committee worked on, and that'll be in the final version of the budget. Okay, any questions or comments with regard to that? Seeing none, we'll move on.
Thank you. Next is page 145, which is street and alley maintenance. And as indicated in the memo, Alderman Bram had requested this as a circle back. To further clarify, that was line item 80-15 on page 145.
Yes, 80-15. Roadway improvements, page 145. B and C, okay. Okay, any additional setup, or should we,
Staff put together some information which further broke down the budget amount of the $3,098,600, and additionally answered some questions for Alderman Bram regarding percentage of streets which are asphalt, which are concrete, dates of repaving, and such. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions, and I may or may not, depending on the question, bring up people from engineering and public works.
Okay, so we have attachment B and C as additional backup. Any additional questions for city staff or comments? Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to kind of go over exactly where I'm coming from and why I made this a circle back item. First, I think it's appropriate for me to provide some history to the council members who haven't been here as long as I have in fighting to get a substantive plan for the northeast section of Elmhurst to see the concrete streets, which are approximately 50 years old, revitalized. My tenure has been over 12 years now, and pretty much since day one, I've been asking for a plan. Since day one, I have been asking only for a plan, not for reconstruction on day one. Well, 10 years later, approximately, these past 2 years, this year exactly, I received a plan. A plan that is not complete, a plan that does not show when all of the streets within the northeast section of Elmhurst will be reconstructed. A plan, and I have some visual aids. A plan, and if you look at this map, and it is a part of the attachments, all the red and blue and green on here are the streets within the city of Elmhurst that have been reconstructed over the past 20 years. Well, if you look, and if you look closely, pretty much all of the streets, some here and there within the center of town, some here and there within the south section of town. But if you look at the north side of town, it is pretty much blank. And the streets that you do see some vibrant colors, being blue, have only been reconstructed or overlaid with asphalt, not reconstructed from ground up, overlaid to extend the life, which I would debate. The life is at its end due to the fact that the subbase of the concrete streets is coming through the concrete as it is today, as I've showed pictures in the past, with weeds growing out of it. But there's pretty much been 3 streets as an entirety that have seen any type of overlay, and I do give the city kudos. Those has only occurred within the last 2 years. But I ask about fairness. One of my residents have talked about fairness between the northeast section of town and overall city of Elmhurst. I don't think it's fair to have the city of Elmhurst map show red, blue, and green pretty much complete everywhere except the northeast section of town. That is this map. This is what has occurred over the last 20 years. When I first came on board as an alderman, I was told by city staff that concrete streets typically last 30 years. Well, 30 years of this area of town on the age of these streets came and gone. They're now at about the 50-year-old mark. Since then, I have been communicated that concrete streets in residential areas should last 40 years. Once again, that has come and gone. As of today, the memo that is a part of the attachments on board docs says that concrete streets now should last 50 to 75 years. 50 to 75 years. Well, I have asked and have yet to receive an answer on what data states that concrete streets should last 50 to 75 years. Well, that's what we've done in the past, has been the only response. I'm not a civil engineer. I am an engineer, but not a civil engineer. I don't know the great deal about concrete streets, but I did do a little bit of my own research, and that research showed that the Village of Northbrook clearly states on their website, and anybody could take a look right now, that they take care of their residential concrete streets. They do maintenance at a 10-year mark, maintenance at a 20-year mark, and reconstruction at a 30-year mark. But the city of Elmhurst believes that our concrete streets should last more than double, 50 to 75 years. With, once again, I personally have asked on multiple occasions, what data supports this? I ask you, does this street look like a street that lasts 50 to 75 years? This pothole, if you so call it that, is about 4 feet by 3 feet. This is a concrete street that should be lasting for another 25 years. This is the area that had the dandelion growing out of it 5 years ago when it was published in the Independent newspaper. This pothole is down to dirt level. I can grow a garden if the cars wouldn't be driving over it. For depth, I just used a $5 bill. It's twice approximately the depth of the height of a $5 bill. It is not in a state of just simple repair. These streets are not in the condition of saying that they can last another 25 years. Years ago, the city of Elmhurst did their due diligence and did a study of this area of town. Pretty much the thickness is probably the depth of that pothole I just showed you. In this study, it clearly states some of the streets are in fair condition, some are in good, some are in fair, good, and I think the other grading was poor. This was done in 2005, and we still, 8 years later, don't have a plan, going on 9 years, don't have a plan to revitalize the streets in the northeast section of town. Some more visual aids. Some of the data that was attached to board docs shows, technically it shows the last 5 years, but if you actually look at the asterisk, it actually shows the last 6 years. This is a summary of what has been done for concrete streets. This is a summary of what has been done for asphalt streets. To give you some concrete street reconstruction, back in 2008, 2009, there was a budget of $600,000. There is a double asterisk because there was a carryover from the year before. In 2008, 2009, $0 out of $600,000 were spent. In 2009, 2010, it was dropped to $200,000 for concrete street reconstruction. $0 were spent. In 10-11 fiscal year, $0 were budgeted. Of course, $0 are spent. Do we see a pattern? 2011, 2012, $0 were budgeted, $0 were spent. In 2012-13, $300,000 were spent, or budgeted, and $313 plus were spent. So over 6 years, $300,000 were spent on the revitalization or the patching of concrete streets. Well, surely that's how this was missed, because obviously we weren't spending dollars to patch this in 6 years' time. I will emphasize street resurfacing for asphalt streets. In 2008, 2009, $1.75 million was budgeted and 1.6 plus was spent. And I'm not going to go through every line item, but even the lean years that there was $0 budgeted for concrete street reconstruction, there was still $1.5 million and $875,000 not only budgeted, but spent for street resurfacing for asphalt streets. This isn't even including the street ceilings that done for asphalt streets or the asphalt patching. I do say, and I do understand, that the greater percentage of streets in the city of Elmhurst are definitely asphalt streets. So there should be more dollars spent. But I do also say that $0, no matter what, in the lean years or not, is not acceptable. Where we are today, this is a map, more visual aids. I was always told that visual aids have a bigger impact than any words that I could say. This is a map of concrete street resurfacing plan from 2013 to 2020. The area that I'm speaking to is the northeast section of town. And as I said when I started talking, I give kudos to the staff in the last couple of years because there is somewhat of a plan in the next 7 years to cover some of this area of town. The other main area that has concrete streets in the city of Elmhurst, which I drove on multiple occasions because I was told how horrible they are. I didn't find any potholes with weeds growing out in this area, but they will be pretty much complete in this additional 7-year plan, where we're just getting started. We don't have a complete plan to redo the streets in this area at all. When I have brought this up on numerous occasions over these last 2 years, I've had meetings with the city manager and public works directors. I have spoken here on the dais. I've actually made a referral to the Public Works Committee because I thought that was the way to get moving on having a solidified plan to take care of concrete streets. With all that work done, I was told that, Alderman Bram, it is your responsibility, yours, to find monies to take care of the revitalization of concrete streets. I say absurd. Why do I say absurd? This is a basic, fundamental infrastructure need that no alderman should be looking for dollars to make sure that we take care of it. None. It's not done when it comes to the asphalt streets. It's never been. I've been here 12 and a half years. It's never been asked of an alderman, and I posed that question to city staff, and they have still not answered that question. It has never in my tenure has any alderman stated, I need extra dollars for a basic infrastructure need. The next item we'll be discussing here tonight is about a pedestrian underpass. Well, surprise, surprise, no alderman found dollars for that, but it's been in our budget book for the last 2 years. There's many examples that no alderman has found dollars, but it appears in our budget book. The city manager is the budget officer. The city manager is responsible for allocating appropriate dollars to make sure basic infrastructure needs are taken care of. For shame that I should be burdened with the incredible task of knowing this budget document enough where I'm supposed to find dollars. And that's why I'm here tonight. If you can't tell, there's a little bit of passion between this discussion, because I am frustrated that I was ever posed the question to find dollars for basic infrastructure, especially when it's never been done, ever. It's utterly ridiculous. But even with that notion, that it's a ridiculous notion that I, as an elected official, should know this budget book than city staff, I found dollars. I was told that those dollars weren't in the appropriate fund, but I found the acceptable amount of dollars to move forward with, at least within this fiscal year and the following fiscal year. And the city manager was correct. It wasn't in the appropriate fund, but they were dollars, and that's what I was tasked with. And those dollars, even if it's in a different fund, could be reallocated to take care of additional infrastructure needs from that fund to free up infrastructure needs that takes care of this. I have brought many city of staff to see this pothole. Many city of staff have acknowledged this pothole. No city staff has resolved this pothole, unless you consider cold patch resolution. The last thing I have to say on this topic is in regards to the other data that City Engineer Kim McGrew has provided, and that was a memo of how many miles of concrete street there is in the city of Elmhurst and how many miles of asphalt street there is. There's 122.6 miles of asphalt street, approximately. There's 22.4 miles of concrete streets. And now I'm going to have to delay a little bit to go to that memo. But essentially, that's about 5.5 times asphalt versus concrete. But if you look, and I might be misquoting here, but going from memory, if you look at the actual memo, the memo says we're taking care of 7 miles of asphalt street in one fiscal year, but barely doing 1 mile of concrete streets. Is that fair? There's 5.5 times the amount of asphalt streets as concrete streets, but we're doing 7 times the amount of asphalt streets every year? I don't know. That math doesn't work out for me. So I'm perplexed on what my next move is, because the referral has been discussed on multiple occasions within the committee. And I agree with some of my fellow committee members' statements of where to go from a committee level. So I'm left with asking that we actually, as an alderman, as an elected official, knowing the budget as well as I do, to make an amendment, and I'm going to need the city staff's assistance on this amendment, to increase the funds to allow to have a sufficient plan to redo the concrete streets with asphalt overlay within this fiscal year and the following fiscal years. I don't think it's fair to say at about 60 years, this little portion here, about 1/3 of this area, about 60 years, we won't even be done with half of the area. So, I don't know if it's City Manager Grabowski or maybe one of the staff from Public Works, but I am not aware if 80-15 on page 145 is the appropriate line item to allocate the appropriate funds. So before making any motion to amend, I need clarification on what that amendment should be.
Alderman Bram, could you summarize exactly, is it a dollar amount? I just want to make sure we're clear what you're asking for.
I would assume it would have to be a dollar amount due to the fact that we're talking budget, correct?
You're the one making the proposal. I assume you'd have a dollar amount?
I have a dollar amount, yes. That is what I'm asking city staff right now, is 80-15, the line item that should be increased or reallocated, what have you, to show additional funding for asphalt overlay for concrete streets.
Well, I heard two different things. Reallocation is one thing and additional funding. Is that two separate?
I'm not clear on how this line item is broken up to be able to say if it's reallocation or additional funding. My belief is it would be a need for additional funding.
Okay. I think City Manager Grabowski is working on trying to clarify some of that.
Overlay, yeah. While he's doing that, all visual aids were paid for by Alderman Michael Bram, none, no tax dollars.
Seriously?
It was a little bit of a joke.
City Manager Grabowski.
Thank you. If I can just ask further clarification on what Alderman Bram is asking for, that is all of the north-south streets from York to Geneva, and then North End Avenue, Fullerton Avenue, Belden, Crestview, and Gladys, and Armitage.
Could someone turn off that water? I missed your question.
The area you're talking about are all the north-south streets from York to Geneva, and then the east-west streets of North End, Fullerton, Belden, Crestview, Gladys, and Armitage.
That is correct, sir.
Okay. Using very rough calculations that Public Works Director and City Engineer just gave me, and that would be another $3 million approximately to repave all those. That is the approximate cost today to repave those streets.
Is that a?
To grind and,
To grind and overlay with asphalt, which, just to clarify, that is the policy that we're going with now for the concrete streets. Our policy is not to rebuild a concrete street, but to overlay it. And the reason why is that a concrete street gives us an incredible base to overlay, where we can then mill and repave again and again and again. And so that seems to be the most cost-effective way to approach concrete streets. And unless we get funding from some other source, that is the way that we are going to approach the concrete streets.
could I ask for a clarification for the council? In the memo that Kim McGrew sent, or no, yeah, sent to Steve Weinstock, the one that was in our packet here,
Attachment B.
there's a yearly budget for concrete and asphalt, and it shows 300,000 for concrete and 1.75 million for asphalt. And the number in our budget of 8015 is about 3.1 million. So is that additional maintenance, or what is the additional?
That was broken down in an additional memo in the packet, and I believe it's the page just before the memo from Engineer McGrew.
Aha.
Includes a number of other streets that are in there. First Street roadway improvement, the North York Street improvement, parking lot resurfacing. The big number is the City Hall porous paver parking lot, and just keep in mind that $650,000, that assumes that we are gonna get a $600,000 grant for that.
Got it.
Mr. Mayor, the question is, though, that what is currently in that table that Kim McGrew provided is concrete versus asphalt. My understanding is that the concrete line item, which is not 80-15 that we're speaking about, I don't believe, the concrete line item is not where, am I incorrect? I see some looks.
We believe it is.
It is, okay. The concrete, 300,000, is to do the patchwork and the reconstruction, correct? That is not where the asphalt overlay is coming from, is it? It is. The 300,000 is coming from the asphalt, or the $300,000 supports the asphalt overlay. That's not what the form says in the budget book, and that's not what we discussed in the Public Works Committee.
CB 23.
Page 23 in the capital book, or capital pages. So there's 27, which is, thank you, page 27 in the capital book is concrete street reconstruction. That, my understanding, is the $300,000 that's budgeted yearly. That is pretty much replacing concrete when that's done. That, I did not believe, at least from previous discussions, was the asphalt overlay on concrete streets. The asphalt overlay of concrete streets, I believe, is the street resurfacing program, which is the 1.75, yeah, 1.75.
It's really been a recent change where the $300,000 concrete street construction has now turned into the overlay program. So again, they're both included in that account number, and the philosophy now is to do the overlay with the $300,000 in addition to the $1,750,000 for street resurfacing. So they are combined, and they are combined in that line item.
Okay, and concrete patching then would be the other line item.
And that's a separate maintenance line item.
Okay, so even though we're overlaying with asphalt, it's underneath the concrete reconstruction line item.
Under the roadway improvement capital line item, correct, 8015.
Okay. So then for 8015, the motion would be to double what is currently allocated from 300,000 to 600,000, pretty much from here on out. But for this fiscal year, it would be from 300 to 600,000. And if there's concern over funding, we could reduce the allocation of asphalt street reconstruction of the 1.75 million.
Okay, so Alderman Bram, just to clarify, because we do have the breakouts, I was looking at the wrong schedule before. We do have the individual breakouts, not only of that 1750, but also of the complete line item, basically 3.1 million. You're entertaining or you're proposing a motion to increase 80-15 on page 145, an additional 300,000, because there's already 300,000 in there, to a total of 3.6 million 800.
No, 3.4 million.
No, 3.6, because that already includes a 300,000, and Alderman Bram wants it doubled. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the total number. You're right.
About 3.4.
3.4 million, yeah, 3,398,600. Sorry, I was adding up the wrong column. Alderman Bram, is that correct?
That is correct. Upon discussion, if any of my colleagues have further discussion, I will determine if I follow up with a subsequent motion to amend to reduce the asphalt street portion of that line item.
Okay, so, even though we're committee of the whole, tradition has it that when we come to adjusting budgets, we do follow Robert's rules. So Alderman Bram, you're making a motion to increase 80-15 by 300,000 to 3,398,600. Is that correct?
Sorry, you keep asking that when I don't have it in front of me.
Yes.
That is correct.
I'll take that as a motion.
Yes.
Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second.
There's a second for the motion. Any discussion? Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a question. So 1.75 and $300,000, those two in effect are pretty much doing the same thing. We're talking about milling and relaying asphalt, whether it's on a concrete base or an existing asphalt base.
That is correct.
Okay.
This is attachment.
So wouldn't another option be to simply reallocate? I mean, it's $2 million, $2,050,000. Couldn't it be reallocated differently so that more concrete streets are done and less asphalt?
Yes.
I think he's asking.
City Manager Grabowski, you want to give the official opinion on that?
Well, the way that the streets are repaved or repaired in any given year is based on condition. So we evaluate the asphalt streets, we evaluate the concrete streets, we evaluate the unimproved roads. And then engineering makes a recommendation on which ones need to be repaired. The reason that there's significantly more dollars allocated towards asphalt each year is due to the fact that 82% of our roads are asphalt, and they don't last as long as a concrete road. Concrete roads do last a long, long time. There are repairs that need to be made to them, no question. And our street division philosophy is, if we know that the road's going to be repaved in some short time frame, we will cold patch areas that need to be cold patched. And if it's not going to be repaved for some time, we will cut squares and re-pour concrete to keep that road intact. So that's the biggest difference. Could we reallocate? We could. It takes it away from some of the asphalt roads that need to be repaired then, which could be anywhere in town. It could be the northwest corner, the southeast corner, the center of town. We just evaluate the roads by their condition and then make the order based on that observation.
Thank you.
Alderman Deuter?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, right now we are treating those pots separately. So it's not just the worst streets get serviced. if the worst streets happen to be concrete, are we capping out at that amount of concrete streets? And is that a necessary distinction? Shouldn't it not just be the worst streets get repaired?
The rate of deterioration is different between the two types, so that's why they're separated.
Right, and then I kind of understand why those pots of money exist, but if we're treating them the same way, I guess I'm just trying to figure out if the streets, we should be servicing the worst streets, regardless of if they're concrete. If they're truly in worse condition, it seems like they should be the priority. I realize their life has been longer, and so the pots of money initially were set up to be distinct, but I feel like if that money is doing the same thing, if it's repairing our streets, that distinction seems a little bit artificial now that we're resurfacing them in the same way. I mean, so I guess following up on what Alderman York asked is, can we combine them and just service the worst streets first?
Give me a minute. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, while that's being looked up, if any city staff speaks, could we make sure they speak to the microphone so it's on the ear, please?
Well, I'll allow Jim Alderman. It's only 10 to 9 and I'm already losing it. City Manager Grabowski to confer with staff and relay their information. If they do need to speak, we'll give them a microphone. City Manager Grabowski.
Thank you. The collective thought is that, yes, we could combine them, but that doesn't guarantee that the concrete streets would rise to the top as the worst streets.
Well, I think, I understand that. What I heard Alderman Deuter, and I assume that's what people here expect, is whether they're concrete streets or asphalt streets, you're going to repair the worst streets in town first. And we hope you stick with that. And that's what you're telling me?
Yes, but there may be streets in other parts of town that are in worse shape than the concrete streets. And if we combine them, then those asphalt streets would get repaved before the concrete streets that are in better shape.
So you're saying to a point, we do that, but then we also separate the budget. We draw a line at some point and say, what are we going to do in concrete? What are we going to do in asphalt?
Yes.
And you're saying if we combine it, you don't know what you're going to get. I mean, we still think this is not just a number you picked out of thin air. This is an educated number, but it could be 350 in concrete and 1.7 in asphalt, or it could be 1.8 in asphalt and 250 in concrete. Is that what you're telling me? Is that what you're telling us?
It could be, but I believe we've stuck with the 300 from past.
Okay.
Past allocations towards that.
No, I got it. I think I got it. Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems to me that the fundamental question underlying all of this is, are we spending enough money to repair our streets? Whether there's a logic behind allocating separate money for the concrete streets, which will eventually all be asphalt streets given the way we're rebuilding them. But until that happens, whatever the underlying logic is, the fundamental question is, are we spending enough money to maintain the streets in Elmhurst? And I think Alderman Bram is making a very convincing case that we have not allocated enough money to keep up with the rate of deterioration of these streets. And if that's because the balance throws most of the money into the street resurfacing line, which deals with the asphalt streets, and we have failed to spend money on concrete street repair in 4 of the last 5 fiscal years, that maybe we need to do some catch-up and ramp up the amount of money we're spending this year and moving forward. So I think trying to find other money to add into this budget line addresses a fundamental responsibility of the city of Elmhurst. And so I do support upping at least the portion of this budget line that we're looking to spend on the concrete street rebuilding. That is really distracting, Alderman Bram. And I support that, and I think we're gonna have to take a hard look at other lines in this budget just to make sure that we've got a balance so that we can shift money into this and address those concrete streets. So I support increasing this budget line. I think we're at a point where we can do it, and I think that there's been a clear case made for why we need to support at least a more aggressive program of rebuilding the concrete streets. I don't expect us to do all of them in the next year, but I think unless we start to get ahead of it, we're never gonna address the worst ones.
Okay. Alderman Levin.
I think I would like to have some additional information to know what the premises are upon which we're making the decision, because Alderman Bram is saying that the city believes that concrete pavement lasts 60 years, and if that's true, that's not, I'm not an engineer either, but I know how to read, so my understanding was 30 or 40 years. So I would like to know if our cycle is built on 60 years, and if that is in fact a good way to base it. And then secondly, before we start going too far down the road, no pun intended, if we could see what staff's reaction is to what Alderman Bram is saying in terms of a problem that he's pointed out year after year, and how that fits into the scheme of our decision on what roads get maintained.
City Manager Grabowski, I think there's two questions there. One, city staff's opinion on the lifespan of concrete streets in Elmhurst, and Alderman Bram's favorite pothole.
And I'd have to talk with Public Works staff to really get those answers.
Alderman Bram, what street is that, if I may ask?
This street, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
This is, I always get the two mixed up, Fullerton.
Fullerton?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
No, I always mix up Fullerton and Belden. This one's, oh, what is the intersecting street? Willow.
Say it again?
Willow.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, City Manager Grabowski.
I would need to confer with the city engineer and the Public Works director. I don't know the answer to either one, particularly the 60-year life. That's something that I would depend on the engineers to tell us.
Any other comments or questions on the underlying motion? Alderman Dunn.
I don't know if I missed this. I heard the figure of $3 million to more aggressively attack these streets. At $300,000 a year, how long would it take to completely resurface all the concrete streets? So, I mean, there are 22 miles of concrete streets. Not sure if I heard the answer to that.
Why don't you come up here, Steve? Thank you.
There's 23 miles of concrete streets, so 23 years, we're doing about a mile a year with $300,000, so 23 years. There's about 10 miles in the Third Ward area that Alderman Bram's talking about, but that money doesn't all go to those concrete streets. It goes to other concrete streets in the city as well.
I'm surprised it's only $300,000 for 1 mile, because I know when we did West Avenue, that was about a mile, and that was about $1 million project. Are they vastly different?
Well, West is a collector street. It carries a lot more traffic, so it would have a higher design standard than residential streets.
Okay, thanks.
It's wider as well.
Any other questions or comments? Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To answer the question in regards to what rises to the top, if you look, as I showed before, most of the city of Elmhurst has already been done within the 20-year span. So I don't know what other priority there would be. I don't understand on how this photo doesn't say it rises to the top. I've asked the question, and I hate to go forward with the motion, Mr. Mayor, because Alderman Levin's question that he asked this evening is one that I've asked repeatedly. And I don't want a vote to be taken when my colleagues don't have the appropriate data before them to make an educated vote. I will tell you the homework that I have done. I've already mentioned Northbrook that repairs their concrete streets in a 30-year cycle. Elmhurst has boldly stated anywhere from 30 to 75 years. But this report I referenced that's 3 inches thick that was done about 8-9 years ago, Fullerton, where this photo was taken 8-9 years ago, I'll just give some examples. Condition of longitudinal pavement joints, poor. Transverse pavement joints, poor. Pitting, spalling, or potholes, yes. 8-9 years ago, the street still hasn't been touched. What rises to the top or not, I don't know how that's done. But I could tell you that this street, as one of many that I can provide as an example, 9 years ago, the good money we spent for an actual study said that this street was poor. The joints were poor. There is potholes and spalling. Spalding? I don't know what it's called. Spalling. 8-9 years ago. Weeds 6 years ago growing out of it. So I don't know if $300,000 is the right amount. I don't know if $600,000 is the right amount. But one of my many visual aids here showed that in the next, I don't know, I think it was 7 years. In the next 7 years, we wouldn't be done with this area. And if we're seeing this today, could you imagine what's going to be happening 7 years down the line? One of my residents is here tonight, took time out of their busy life and talked about how this area doesn't have sidewalks. Could you imagine walking or riding your bike or skateboarding or doing whatever you do on a street like this? Do I see liability? Heck yeah. So, Mr. Mayor, I don't know where to go.
Well, you have a motion. You want to stick with the motion, or you want to withdraw the motion?
I want to understand what my alternatives are, because Alderman Levin, and haven't heard from many of my other colleagues, but has valid questions that have not been answered, and I have not received an answer to date. So I don't know if we should place a vote with pending questions. What are my alternatives?
Well, you can, we either have to move forward with the motion as is, with the information we have in front of us tonight, or you can withdraw the motion and I guess take it up in committee and always try to, ask more money and come back to the city council and ask for money outside of budget after that. I understand Alderman Levin has some questions, but this is our budget meeting and it's a very intricate, you've done a very good job of giving a lot of details and it's very intricate. We either need to move forward with your motion, or if you want to withdraw it, you can withdraw it and have city staff or others analyze it more and come back with a separate proposal. Alderman Kennedy, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things in my 5 years on Public Works, we have always looked at the condition of the streets. I think Jimmy Harakawa does this, and gives us a list of the streets that need to be addressed in the upcoming fiscal years. And in my recollection, I don't ever remember staff coming back to us and saying that we needed additional money to address streets that were in great disrepair. So, I know there's this comment that, concrete streets should only last 20 years, 30 years, whatever. In the area of Crescent Park, those streets were more than, I believe, 70 years old before those were finally covered. So, one size does not fit all. It depends on the quality of the roadway when it was initially put down, how it's weathered and been used over the years. And so, we have a budgeted amount of dollars. We work and address those streets that are in the worst condition. And I think that is the way that we should going forward. If staff is coming to us saying to Alderman Deuter's comment, if staff is coming to us and saying, we have serious problems and we need to do another mile worth of roadway, then, that's when we should be looking for additional money. But just because a road is constructed out of concrete doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be replaced right now. Again, we need to be working on the most important item of the day, and if that's the worst streets, that's what we should be working on, regardless of how it was originally constructed.
Okay. Any other comments? Alderman Levin?
Well, I hear what Alderman Bram is saying, but I don't know that I have enough information to support the motion right now because, and I don't think staff is prepared to answer it tonight. It could be a matter, what Alderman Kennedy, who chairs the committee, is saying is there hasn't been a need to ask for additional resources to expedite the repair schedule. And then Alderman Bram is pointing out that there are roads that are in such disrepair that, and I haven't seen them myself, that they're not drivable. So it doesn't seem like we have the information to make a decision tonight. I don't know that it can't be brought back later, but without any information from staff, it's difficult to make a decision on this, and I don't hear any answers coming forward tonight. Maybe an amendment can be made later, but I can't support a motion at this point, although it may have substantial basis to it.
Alderman York?
Thank you, Your Honor. I tend to agree with Alderman Levin, and one thing that I've brought up to Public Works staff too has been when we put the bid out for the X number of miles of concrete or of street resurfacing, and we have $2,050,000 in the budget, a lot of times that comes in at 1.8 or 1.9, and I think we can make some headway by just making sure that we use everything that's in the budget. I think we'll accomplish more. It's just due to economic circumstances and things like that sometimes that the bid actually comes in less than what is in the budget amount. So I think we could pick up some ground if we were to then take those additional dollars and do some more. But I would like to see some more information before I could support it. I understand that there are roads that are in bad shape, believe me, and I do ride my bike up in the neighborhood, and I know you have to be careful when you're navigating, but thank you.
City Manager Bobrowski, you wanted to add something?
I believe Alderman Kennedy answered one of the questions that Alderman Levin had in the age of the roads. We do have some concrete roads in town that are 75 years old that even haven't been overlaid yet. And that's where engineering staff is kind of taking that number from and they pared it down to 60, I think, in the memo.
Let me ask you this. Is Public Works currently looking at this? Is this still pending before them, a more robust plan or a more,
No.
no?
I believe they've closed that item out, at least for this budget year.
Okay, and let's just play what if, hypothetically.
Mr. Mayor, sorry to interrupt, but to expound on that.
Yeah, wait a second, Alderman Bram, you've had plenty of time to talk. I'm trying to get through this as quickly as possible because we have a long night ahead. So allow me to ask my question to see if I can get the information I'm looking for.
But you're actually asking a question under misinformation. Go ahead.
If it's determined by city staff or committee after our budget's been passed that the city needs another $500,000, $300,000, $400,000, there certainly is an avenue for that, yes?
Yes, we can always
And
amend
how
the
would
budget.
how does that work?
We would present a budget amendment to the council.
And would that go through committee first? If it was, let's say it was a committee-specific issue.
It could come through, I would think it would come through committee because they would determine that we need, I'm going to say, $1 million more. And then they'd come to the council, and the way from an accounting procedure standpoint, it would be an amendment to the budget. When you amend the budget, if you're increasing expense, you also have to have a revenue source, or it's not a valid amendment. That revenue source could be fund balance.
Okay. All right. Alderman Gutenkopf.
First, I think I need to correct a little misinformation that Alderman York stated. Yes, indeed, sometimes we might have, say, $2 million in the budget for street paving, and the bid comes in substantially under that. It is always our practice to take that as a unit bid and to then pave up to the total dollar amount that's in the budget. So essentially, the contractors are bidding on numbers of units, a flat number of units. We see how much we can get, and then we extrapolate that out to the dollar amount of the budget. Could some internal shifting be done? Of course it could, but I don't think that's the point. I think the point of this is, should we increase the paving by an additional $300,000? It's a bottom line, fundamental, very basic question, is do we want to pave 2 miles of concrete streets in Elmhurst in 2014? That's what we're asking for right now. We pave 1 mile, should we be paving 2 miles? If we pave 2 miles, obviously we're going to catch up more on the backlog of paving that needs to be done. And I think we're asking the city council to say, yes, this is something that we value. We value paving 2 miles of concrete streets in Elmhurst for $300,000. And that's all we're asking for your support on.
Alderman Honquist.
So I am not sure how much it will cost to pave an additional mile or 2 miles or 10 miles. But if we add $300,000 to the budget, don't we end up in the same process where the city's going to determine which streets get paved and which streets do not get paved? I don't know if we have a particular prejudice against this part of town. I'm going to assume we don't. But if we add $1 million to the budget, I'm not sure how that's going to get allocated. I don't know if it's going to solve Alderman Bram's problems. We're just all you're asking for is to increase the budget. I'm not sure increasing the budget addresses those particular problems. Even if it does, given some of the earlier questions and comments, I don't understand this area of town or whether we should be asking for $300,000, $3 million, or $6 million. So I would need more information before I could support whether it's $300,000 or $5 million to understand how we address the roads. I'm assuming staff has given us the budget on what they think needs to be done, and until we get something different, which I'd assume would go through committee, I think that's what we should stay with. Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Bram.
Thank you. The misinformation I was trying to head you off on, Mr. Mayor, was the reason why committee closed this out was because the committee felt it wasn't their position to make a budget call on this particular item, and this forum is the appropriate forum to actually make that decision. It wasn't in regards to lack of information or anything along those lines. So it was the reason why it wasn't this fiscal year it was closed out. It was the referral was closed out because it was decided by the committee that this forum, since it wasn't allocated already by staff, that this forum was the appropriate forum to move forward with a decision like this. So holding off a referral one more year, if it's the same committee members, won't do anything than what we see here today. Again, as Alderman Kennedy pointed out, well, we do the streets that need it most. Don't think so by that photo alone. Alderman Levin's question is valid. I don't understand why we in the city of Elmhurst don't have a plan for concrete street resurfacing when we not only state we take care of asphalt streets one every 20 years, our budgeted line items make sure we get it done in 18-year time frame, which is shown by the red on the map. Basic question on how long concrete streets should last is a valid one. It's a valid one that should have been answered when I started asking the question 12 years ago. Should have been answered for us tonight. I'm not going to withdraw my motion. I would like to see exactly how my colleagues feel if this was in front of their house or this was near their home. I've already shown the visual aid of how we skipped budgeting concrete street reconstruction in the lean years, how we budgeted but didn't spend for concrete street reconstruction. As I stated earlier, and I'll repeat it one last time, over the past 6 years, we spent $300,000. Do you think that's fair? I don't. I'm asking for your support to take care of problems like this. I'm not asking for $1 million today to accelerate this area of town to get it done within the next 5 or 7 years. Crescent Park area, within the next 7 years, is pretty much done. And I wrote it not only today to make sure I had the latest and greatest visual data. You don't see potholes like this on Crescent Park. I rode up and down every single concrete street in that area. It looks like they did some significant concrete patching. You don't see this. I'm asking for a plan, people. I'm asking for what's due to this area. We need to take care of liability issues, and we need to catch up for the 6 years we pretty much spent no monies on. Thank you.
Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. A question regarding just the procedures of the budget. Does the $300,000 cap, if we were to exceed that, does that require a budget amendment, or are those funds, the 1.7 million and the 300,000, are they within the same fund, and staff has that flexibility to spend from either fund?
Yes, you're correct. The latter part of your statement, that we're within that cap for the budget account.
Right.
As long
right.
as that.
So we spend $2 million, and we have budgeted $2 million to spend on the worst roads, and staff has flexibility to spend more than that on concrete if they decide that those are the worst roads. So we may not necessarily need more money, we need more flexibility, or we need to utilize some of our flexibility if in fact those roads are considered the worst. Is that right?
Well, we generally have that split because that's generally the split of asphalt to concrete streets,
Right.
and their age and whatnot.
Right.
So we've tended to stick to those amounts based on that.
Okay, Alderman Levin.
I just want to say, I understand the problem that Alderman is identifying, but I am surprised that people are willing to jump in and say, it's, let's just do it, because I've seen budget items at $30,000 where the call comes out of where's the analysis, where's the evaluation, where's, et cetera. And what I don't have enough right now to say, yeah, we need to put another 300,000 until staff comes back and it's worked through to say, is 2 million enough? Are we putting it at the wrong place? Should we combine the asphalt and the concrete programs into one? I'd certainly be willing to look at it another time, but as we sit here right now, I just, there's no basis for a $300,000 increase because I don't know that that solves the problem.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been listening to the discussion, and I certainly appreciate Alderman Bram's passion, and he's been passionate about the issue every year I've been on the council. But what I'm struck with, and honestly I've been struck with it every year this comes up, is on one hand, we're presented with photos and arguments that we've completely ignored the north side of, or this certain area of town with street reconstruction. To really believe that's true, you're almost accusing staff of dereliction of duty. It hasn't been a money issue. The money's been budgeted. It hasn't been spent according to Alderman Bram. There were some lean years, but there were lean years across the board. It wasn't just street paving that we were lean on. It was across the board. I have not been to those areas of town, and maybe I need to be, or need to go, but I'm wrestling and struggling with the fact that and Chairman Kennedy mentioned his name, Jimmy Hirakawa does our streets, and he is the guy that's on top of it. He is the guy that makes these assessments, he and his staff, along with the rest of Public Works. To believe, honestly, all of what Alderman Bram's saying, it's almost, you have to believe that Jimmy is not covering those streets, or he's covering those streets and closing his eyes, or he and his staff are saying, yeah, now we're not going to do it again. I struggle with that. I don't know that I can support the motion. There's pictures. I think of Berkeley in my ward. There are some sizable potholes on Berkeley in the 5th Ward. There's some curb and gutter that's in disarray. I mean, that's true for every one of our wards. So So I'm struggling with it. I don't think I can support the motion as of right now. And I guess maybe it's on me to go up there and look at these streets for myself and make up my own mind, but, you know, I would think that's what we're paying staff to do, and doesn't seem like there's a lot of middle ground here. It's either as bad as Alderman Bram says, or it doesn't need repair, or somewhere in the middle. I'm not sure.
Alderman Leader.
I would, I echo your comments, actually. But I also echo the comments of Alderman Levin and Honquist and Alderman York, who essentially said we need a little more information. But it does seem to me, if I heard you right, City Manager, that if we were to support Alderman Bram's motion, we would strengthen the third ward. But in effect, we would take away from asphalt streets in the first, the second, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh ward, because that money has to come from someplace. Is that the way I understood you?
If it's reallocated from the asphalt streets, the 1.75,
Yeah.
then yes, it would come from other streets. Other streets would be postponed, and additional concrete streets would be done. That doesn't necessarily mean that it would be the streets that Alderman Bram is specifically referring to. What we have put together and talked about, and I believe was in the packet, was the concrete street resurfacing plan from 2013 to 2020. And what that shows is a progression of the streets from east to west being repaved.
But the practical effect would be to penalize the other wards. If I understand that. That's the way I'm...
Let me clarify.
And I'm asking for...
I'll clarify. At
Please.
one point, there was a discussion of possibly taking the two budget numbers, the 1.75 and the 300, lumping them together, and asking city staff to possibly reprioritize if there was some sort of prejudice in their numbers against concrete streets. And city staff informed us that, in fact, that's about what needs to be done. They had to draw a line in the budget. The motion we're discussing right now, though, is actually adding to the budget $300,000. The proposal's for an additional $300,000, but city staff has said that doesn't necessarily mean the concrete streets in question may get all of that money. It'll go to the normal, through the normal priority, and that's what would happen with these extra funds. We've spent an hour and 20 minutes on this one line item, and I think it's been good conversation. However, I'm going to ask the council, unless you have something new, I think we need to understand we've got about 7 or 8 more line items to get through tonight. So if you have something new or have a quick final comment, from the faces I read around the dais, I think everyone's ready to make their vote. So, Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just a couple quick clarifications. We can hide behind not having enough data. We can hide behind not having staff answer the questions tonight in regards to what our concrete street reconstruction plan is when it comes to this vote. Yes, Mr. Mayor, you already clarified for Alderman Leader, we're not taking away from any other ward here. That's not the amendment. I will say to you and the rest of my colleagues up here that over 6 years, only one of those years, any dollars were spent on concrete streets. So if anything, these past 6 years, the asphalt streets have benefited because there were no dollars spent on concrete streets other than the 12, 13 years. Alderman Healy said, and I just want to be clear, made mention of my numbers. These are numbers presented and given by staff, not Michael Bram's, Alderman Bram's made up numbers. These are numbers presented and given to all of us by staff that there really has been no dollars spent on concrete street reconstruction. So I don't know on how we could say that we cannot find $300,000 to play catch-up for concrete street reconstruction when 2 years out of the last 3 there was no dollars benefited. Normally we do a carryover and we spend those dollars the following year. That hasn't been done. So if we said that $300,000 was allocated each of these fiscal years, one of which was shown 200, but that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, 1.8 million, we spent 300,000. Great, thank you. The people who live along concrete streets appreciate it. I am not, by any way, shape, or form, saying that the northeast section of town with concrete streets needs to be done today. I'll reiterate that because it keeps being implied that I'm showing this photo and I'm saying all streets in the area look like this. They don't, and I'm not saying that. I've never said that. I'm saying the plan, which I'm glad there's something now on the books, is insufficient, and we need to play catch-up. That's what I'm saying. And we should be starting this fiscal year. We should have been starting a couple years ago. This is just a sample. All streets don't look this bad, but we need to have a plan. And I will say that I am embarrassed if we do not have a plan on when concrete streets should be overlaid with asphalt streets. If we don't have that plan today, shame on us. Shame on us if we as a council can't find $300,000 to kick off a plan to add 1 more mile of resurfacing of concrete streets, not only in the northeast section, but Crescent Park and throughout the city of Elmhurst.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I am going to ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll on the motion to take line item 8015 on page 45 from 145, from $3,098,600 to $3,398,600. Clerk Spencer.
Bram.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Reuter.
No.
Dunn.
No.
Leader.
Nay.
Palumsky, absent. Tipskin.
No.
York.
No.
Levin.
No.
Healy.
No.
Honquist.
No.
Kennedy.
Jim?
Kennedy.
I didn't hear you. My answer is no.
Thank you. Mulliner, absent. Wagner.
No.
2 ayes, 10 nays, 2 absent.
2 ayes, 10 nays, that motion fails. On to
I apologize, I didn't know I had my microphone turned around. Okay.
On to circle back item, or the third circle back item, page 157, attachment D. City Manager Grabowski.
Thank you. This was regarding the funding for Phase 1 engineering for the Prairie Path underpass project at York Street. The Phase 1 engineering was proposed so that we could then apply for additional grant funds for the project. That's all I have.
Just real quick, City Manager Grabowski, this is about constructing an underpass at the Prairie Path at York Road, and isn't ballpark cost about $3 million or 3.2? I just want to get the numbers, get on the same page.
1 second, let's find that exact dollar amount.
Page 39 of the 5-year capital expenditure.
Yes, roughly, the total we have is $3 million.
$3 million is the estimated cost for the project. This is for the engineering part, which is in the line item as 130 or 125. What's the number? I don't have it in front of me.
I believe it went down to 125, actually. Yes,
Okay.
125.
150.
What page are we on with Alderman Healy? Do you know what page?
Oh, I turned.
Page 157.
I'm sorry, 157. And then my final question or comment. Do we have a commitment from DuPage County for part of the dollars?
We do not have a commitment. We've not talked to DuPage County about funding any portion of this yet.
Not this portion, but the whole project.
We have grant funds through the DuPage Mayor Managers Conference for a portion of the construction, yes.
And that's for 1.7 or 1.8?
Yes.
All right. I think that sets the stage. Any other comments or questions?
Yes, the only other comment I have is there was some information that was requested from the Alderman when this was made a circle back. One of them is the traffic crash and accident history at that area, which the police department provided. And then the other one was underpass crime data citywide.
And that's all in attachment D?
That is all in attachment D, correct.
So crime data and accident.
Yes, and then additionally, there was a request made about all crossings in DuPage County and whether they are overpass, underpass, or at grade. And so that information was included as well.
Okay. Comments or questions? Yes. Oh, Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to bring to the council's attention a project that the Active Transportation Alliance is working on. They're partnering with the DuPage County Health Department and the DuPage County Division of Transportation to create a plan for safer, more convenient road crossings along the main stem of the Prairie Path. They have not yet completed their analysis. They have simply begun the process by surveying users of the trail to get a handle on what challenges trail users have at road intersections. And I would suggest that until their overall plan for the entire length of the path is completed, that we would be premature in attempting to build an underpass at this location, because I think that we'll have much more county support and potential funding for improvements at this intersection once this plan is completed. They started this month, as a matter of fact, with the survey document seeking feedback from trail users as an attempt to understand kind of what's going on, the whole length of the path. I think that a project like this is best served when it's taken taken as part of the total consideration of the whole project and the whole path. We've done some path realignments, which were very simple corrections that we've made to move the path to stop sign crossings, and those made perfect sense. This isn't that kind of a thing. This is a much bigger project, a more expensive project, one that I'm not even sure the residents support. Certainly, we haven't even had an opportunity to formally go to residents to understand their support for a project of this magnitude. I can give you lots of anecdotal evidence of residents who don't want it, won't use it, and don't think that it's an important, necessary way for us to be spending tax dollars. Thank you.
Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I appreciate the concern for safety at this crossing and all our crossings in the city. I think it's important as we think about an investment of this magnitude to take note of the investment we made at the end of last year, which I think was about $30,000 at the path to put in the warning lights and a pedestrian push button. My sense is it might be working. It might be having some positive effect. We went from 12 accidents, I think, in 2012 to 1 accident in the first 13 months of this year. And I would like to think that's because we made a smart $30,000 investment in improving the safety of that crossing. Maybe that's all we need. But I think we have seen some really positive effects with that investment.
Any additional comments or questions? Alderman Bram?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, as I pulled this line item when I saw it the first time last year, I thought this warranted committee discussion It's a large proposed project, no matter where the funding's coming from, grant or otherwise. It's a large project. Funny enough, it wasn't scrutinized where this $150,000 came from for capital improvements on this project. But we have those dollars, I guess. The basis of this issue has not been discussed within this past year in the Public Works Committee as requested by myself last year during the budget discussions. I believe a project of this magnitude should have been discussed to see if we, as a council, deem that this an appropriate and necessary project. That hasn't come through committee, that hasn't come to the council for the approval or denial of such a large-scale project. As Alderman Deuter and Gutenkopf already stated, some very valid points. When I look at the actual accident data, because I actually requested, and I actually got all the accident reports that were listed in the summary here. Some of them weren't as clear as others, but I like to go on this data, and this data didn't show anything other than pretty much distracted drivers. That's what this data really showed. Some of the accident reports didn't say it was due to people crossing the path or people being stuck in traffic waiting for a jogger to cross the path or not. So it's really kind of inconclusive to say that the path had any type of contribution to any of those accidents. But I don't feel that we should move forward with this in this budget year and maybe not in the future budget years. I was hoping when we came to this budget cycle that we would have already determined if this is a valid project or not as a council. I don't know what other improvements have been proposed to the Public Affairs and Safety Committee. I would like to hear from them if there has been additional improvements to this intersection, what have they seen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. From everything that I understand, there is really a groundswelling from at least the individuals that I spoke with of residents of Elmhurst who do not want this project, don't see a need for this project. There's a whole bunch of I's not dotted and T's not crossed when it comes to maintenance, when it comes to having the county board sign up for this. The grant application that I reviewed last year showed that there was some very brief discussions, or it alluded to some discussions with the county board. It alluded to some discussions of the city working with the park district for either property swap or property purchase. You know, there's an underpass like this is significant, would take a great deal of land, would take some trees down as well. You got to talk about maintenance. You have to be concerned about that. You have to be concerned about security and flooding and everything else. And the last thing is, this isn't a city of Elmhurst project. I don't personally feel this is a city of Elmhurst project. This is a project that should be, if at all, funded by the county. The Prairie Path should be, by the Forest Preserve, I believe, is the one who, the County Forest Preserve owns the Prairie Path system, I believe.
Just the county.
Sorry?
It's just the county, Forest Preserve.
Oh, just the county. Thank you, Alderman Healy. So I don't see this being at the top of the project list, or me personally, at the project list level, to be considered, especially for this fiscal year. I really wish we had additional data and had a really thorough discussion on this item as valid or not, but I can't support this when we don't really have a good understanding on if this project is valid for the city of Elmhurst to take on.
Okay, any other comments?
Can I speak?
Committee.
I actually,
Yes.
I think on budget line items, yes.
oh, it's budget, absolutely.
I can speak? Okay. I have been using the Prairie Path for 25 years.
Use the microphone, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have been using the Prairie Path for 25 years. I do not think this is a needed project. I go across many streets, and I always, even though I'm supposed to be able to go because it's a crosswalk, I always check to make sure the cars are stopping. In Lombard, they have a very unusual situation. On Main Street, they have a sign there before the street that the pedestrians are supposed to stop, and the cars frequently do not. So I don't know if that's legal or not. I think I talked to the chief about this, and he wasn't sure how Lombard was getting away with it. But that would make a lot more sense than to dig this thing up. As a user of the path, I would not want to go down a tunnel. I don't think it's safe, especially like late in the evening or around dusk when people are using it. So I am opposed to this path. I think it's a waste of money when we have such a need for flooding money in this community. Okay, that's all.
Alderman Gutenkauf.
I move that we strike a line on page 157 of the general fund budget, 8025 street improvements, the $125,000 for the underpass from the budget.
So make it 0.
Make that 0.
And let me just,
Sheet ready.
Finance Director Gaston, does there have to be any sort of follow-up motion about putting that money back in the general fund, or is that clear enough?
That's clear enough. That's
Okay.
fine.
All right, so we have a motion to change line item 8025 on page 157 from $125,000 to 0. Is there a second? Alderman Bram with a second. Any conversation or comment? Alderman Levin.
If the money is left in the line, I understand this is for engineering studies, is additional authorization required to use the money under, I mean, I know it's in the budget and different items require authorization and others don't, but if we leave it in the budget, does it come back through committee for approval to spend, or is it implicitly available at city manager's direction to commit to the study?
That would depend on the cost of the contract. If it's over $20,000, city council approval is necessary.
Thank you.
Alderman Healy.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, excuse me. Okay, I'm going to start with a review of the project. So this project was first identified in the 5-year capital expenditure budget last year. There was a lot of discussion at that point about the merits of the project. It was then discussed again during the budget year we're in now. And at that point, it was decided by the council to delay it a year and see if, two things, see if there was additional funding available and see if there were any flooding impact, any kind of flood mitigation that could occur. Since that time, it was discussed once in Public Works. When a grant opportunity came up, kind of a last-minute grant opportunity, we were under the gun, had to make a decision very quickly, and at that meeting, I was in support. Alderman Bram, Alderman Bram and Alderman Gutenkauf were not in support, and Chairman Kennedy said he wanted to talk to Director Hughes and ask a few additional questions. And unfortunately, in that time, the time expired for the grant. I recall, and I don't remember the name of the grant, it was ITEC or IIT or ITEP, thank you, and the amount was for $150,000. So we lost that opportunity to gain additional dollars. Staff did a preliminary review on stormwater mitigation and found that while there may be some, there's probably not a lot to make it worthwhile. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there's flood mitigation benefits to doing this project. Alderman Gutenkauf referenced the path crossings at Berkeley and at Spring, and those path changes have been wildly successful. Well received, efficient, easy. I wish the York Prairie Path crossing were that easy. It's not. At Berkeley and at the Prairie Path and at Spring, those are 4-way stops. So we were able to align the path with an existing 4-way stop. This is not this is in the middle of a street. And I think we all know what it's like there. It's difficult. There are bad sight lines. Yes, there were blinking lights and flashing lights that were put in about a year ago. Since that time, there has been one pedestrian accident, motor vehicle and car, and possibly a second car and car accident. I say possibly because the exact installation of the lights and when the car accident occurred, it's up to debate. But definitely one pedestrian vehicle accident. So the further information that we got today regarding the Illinois Prairie Path showed us that there were along the Illinois Prairie Path or the Great Western Trail, there are 13 overpasses and 8 underpasses. The overpasses are on streets with the names St. Charles, Eola, Ferry, Wesley, Edson, and Finley, not major intersections. The underpasses are at North, Stearns, Dunham, and Butterfield. Within Elmhurst, we have 6 pedestrian underpasses. I forgot about the one at Poplar and Cayuga. There are 6, including 2 for the Salt Creek Greenway Trail, under St. Charles and under Roosevelt, specifically constructed to take the bike path under those roadways. So the concept of an underpass in Elmhurst isn't all that foreign. And certainly the concept of taking pedestrians away from traffic is not foreign on the Prairie Path. Why would the county or the city of Elmhurst construct an overpass or an underpass? To take pedestrians away from traffic. It's that simple. So why would we want to do it at York? Undoubtedly, it's a lot of money. $3 million now for total project, 1.2 for the city of Elmhurst, if we get no additional support from whether it's the county or the state. But regardless, it's a lot of money to spend. The records show 24 accidents at or around that intersection. 4 car on pedestrian. I think it was Treasurer Leibowitz said, people not paying attention or distracted. So that's okay? It was their fault? Yes, distracted driving is a problem today. So we have a chance to take pedestrians away from traffic at an intersection we know to be heavily used by Prairie Path users and heavily used by traffic. I asked a couple of our law enforcement officials, I said, guys, what do you think about this? And one of them said something that I hadn't thought of before. And he said, think of the congestion problems that path causes in the morning and the afternoon. People already in line, and those of you that travel that area of the city, whether it's at 8 a.m. or 4 p.m. to about 6 p.m., that's heavily congested. And pedestrians that use the Prairie Path at those times add to that congestion. You cannot debate that intersection is heavily used and the accident rate there is unacceptable. You can't debate it. The numbers show otherwise. So that basically leaves one argument, in my opinion, the money. And I understand that. The day I say that $1.2 million for the city, $3 million overall is not a lot of money, is the time I need to look in the mirror and do something differently. It is a lot of money. But that path is going to be there a long time. That underpass will be there a long time. And it'll take a lot of pedestrians away from vehicular traffic. If we take it out of the budget now, we kill it. And if that's what the council desires, that's probably what we should do, because staff right now is confused. They didn't pursue the grant because they weren't sure. But to remove it from the budget at this point is telling the residents safety doesn't matter unless it's cheap. We got a problem with the sidewalk? Let's put up some flashing lights. That'll work. You want a 4-way stop sign? You want a yield sign? Let's just put up some flashing lights. Now, if you don't think that safety is an issue there, I'd really question you, because the records certainly show otherwise, then vote against this. And if you want to send the message to the residents, unless safety is inexpensive, we're not for it. I think it was Alderman Deuter mentioned 2013, we've had one so far. And that was as of a couple weeks ago. 2009, we had none. 2010, we had 4. 2011, we had 5. 2012, we had 12. So I'm not willing to say that the lights have worked. The intersection's dangerous. And if we think the yellow flashing lights have solved the problem, okay. I don't believe that. And putting that underpass in is in line with bike safety, it's in line with pedestrian safety, it's in line with what we've done in Elmhurst, it's in line with what we've done in DuPage County. I'd ask for your support.
Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question about the process. It seems reasonable that this proposal should go through consideration at the committee level so that there can be a report to council and then a vote. And so, to vote it, to pull this out of the budget, if this means it's killed it, then it doesn't go through that process. But I also hear Alderman Bram saying his expectation was that it was going to go through that process this past year, and it didn't go through. And so in the meantime, staff doesn't know how to proceed. So I'm just wondering, if we leave it in the budget, will it definitively get to committee sometime in the near future so that staff has a clear direction from council?
City Manager Grabowski.
Thank you. Yes, what we would do then is solicit proposals from engineering firms who can perform the work, get the costs from them, and then it would go through Public Works Committee for final for approval or recommendation to City Council.
Yeah, I was thinking the project itself, not the proposal for engineering, but just the concept as a whole. Would there be no consideration until there is this engineering piece done?
Well, what the engineering piece does, it gets the phase 1 engineering done so that we can then apply for additional grant dollars. The CMAQ process is what we are kind of eyeing as additional grant dollars. So once, I guess it was envisioned that is a distinct possibility, if not in the first year of application, perhaps after that we could get significant grant dollars for the remainder of the project. At that point, what I was asking our city engineer about is, if it's grant dollars, how does that progress? And that would basically be an IDOT bid project. However, with phase 1 engineering, phase 2 engineering, which is the design, that would still come through the committee. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I don't know if it answers my question, because I'm really thinking the project as a whole. Does the council want the city to move forward on pursuing an underpass at the Prairie Path? Just that basic question. And I think that's the direction that
I think
staff has not gotten clearly.
If I may, I think the council would vote with either approval or not to fund the engineering. Because if we don't do the engineering, the larger grant that we're in line for, the $1.8 million, goes away. So that's really what it is. Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In all due respect to City Manager Grabowski's comments to Alderman Deuter's question, we're putting the cart before the horse. And Mr. Mayor, I think the point here is we should vote if the project itself is desired by the city council before doing engineering, before applying for any further grants, et cetera, et cetera. That is something we should be, well, in my humble opinion, should have already been done, but that's something that we should be doing before approving or not approving additional funds for engineering. That I think is the key piece here that we're skipping over, that we haven't done in this year since it's been initially discussed. And that's why I have an issue with approving any dollars for this. We've had a year to discuss the validity of the project. Not about engineering, not about any additional grant monies, but about the validity of the project. Somehow we found $150,000 for this budget year to do the engineering, but I don't know until the council itself decides if the project itself is valid, we should move forward. And I don't know, and maybe Alderman Healy or maybe city staff could shed some additional light, if we strike this from this budget line item for this fiscal year, if that kills the project. My understanding when we discussed this in the past was that those grant funds are ours until essentially we say we're not going forward with the project. And I don't think striking it from this fiscal budget year is saying that we're not going forward with the project, since we haven't decided if we should go forward with the project or not. So if I can get clarification on that from, I would assume, staff, if striking this kills the project where it is for any future possibility is one question. And then the other question that still is unanswered is what additional items has the Public Affairs and Safety looked at to improve flow in this area across the Prairie Path? I just want to confer with them in case I missed anything other than what's already in place today.
City Manager Grabowski, is the timing of this engineering, does it affect those grant dollars that have been committed but we haven't utilized yet?
It doesn't affect the grant dollars committed for a few years. At some point, though, the DuPage Mayor Managers group will come back to us and ask where we're programming this so that they can figure out their dollars. And it's not in perpetuity, though. At some point, they will say, you need to use it, or we're going to reallocate it.
Agreed.
Okay. Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think that we need to pay attention to the Active Transportation Alliance survey that they're getting ready, well, that's actually in motion right now. They're gathering data. I'm not against this, but I think we need to look at it in a long-term frame of mind. As a frequent path user, too, I know a couple other major crossings, and I'm trying to remember the names of them. One of them is Main Street Wheaton, where there's actually a fence at Main Street Wheaton, and they force the traffic down a half a block to cross where there's a light and then come back to the path. That's another way of handling the safety issues there. There's another situation like that out on, I believe it's Gary Avenue, too. So I think I fully understand the safety issue. But I think that given the importance and reliance on transportation modes like bicycles and the ATA and things like that, I think we need to pay attention to that. And I think there may be some alternative methods of making the intersection safer that really won't inconvenience people that much and may also be at a lower cost. So I'm kind of leaning towards those angles as opposed to just sticking with $125,000 for just thinking about digging a tunnel. Thank you.
Alderman Gutenkopf.
I have two questions. My first question references the Salt Creek Greenway underpass at Salt Creek and St. Charles. I am of the opinion that Elmhurst did not pay for that. Is that correct?
I can answer that question from my time on the park board. That was a collaborative effort among every community along the path, and every community paid their proportionate amount based on the amount of miles they had on the trail. So the Elmhurst Park District paid a portion for that underpass, but did not pay for that entire underpass.
Thank you, Alderman Healy, because I think that speaks directly to how the funding for this particular underpass could be modeled, since this is not just Elmhurst that uses it. And my second question, it relates to the accident reports. Apparently, according to the document, the accidents are those that have occurred within 250 feet of the prairie path. And when I look at the map, it seems to me that it's possible that South Street and Seminole are within 250 feet of the prairie path intersection at York Road. Is that correct? And if so, is it possible that some of these accidents, since they have happened in that distance, may have been at those street intersections? Is that a possibility?
Well, certainly, I think we'd all agree that Seminole's within 250 feet of the prairie path. Do we have the ability to clarify if these were directly at that crossing or close?
I think if it's at an intersection, it's directly stated in the police report that it's at that intersection.
Well, this document we got with the list said that, I know I gotta find it exactly in the memo. It said that they're within 250 feet of the prairie path, and that's as close as they could get.
There were some that weren't exact.
Would be York and Millette, too.
Of course I can't find it.
Oh, it's stated in the second paragraph of Deputy Chief Panico's memo.
Yeah, there it is.
But the question is, do we have that answer? If we don't have the answer, I think we have to deal with the information we have.
Okay, well,
Alderman, you're Wagner today. Alderman Wagner.
Playing Mr. Wagner, yes, thank you. I don't know who this question actually goes to, but it might be City Manager Grabowski, but the money that's being put aside, this is for the engineering and design phase 1. This is no way connected to the actual construction of an underpass, correct?
That is correct. It's not construction
I
dollars.
want to make sure we get that down. Could it also be an overpass? Does it have to be an underpass?
I know we looked at that when we first conceived the idea, and it seems that the underpass works better for that area than an overpass, and I believe it has to do with the length and the ability to get high enough to clear whatever vehicles are needed on York Street. And so we did evaluate that on staff level before we talked to DuPage mayor managers about the grant opportunities.
Is it possible, or would it be a stipulation in the grant that it has to be an underpass?
the application was for an underpass.
Yeah, I don't know if that materially changes the grant or not.
Okay.
We have to ask about that.
So it's a possibility, it could still be analyzed.
Possibility, I don't know what the dollar difference would be.
Asked and answered. Thank you.
Alderman Levin.
I think the conversation here is enlightening. I am of the opinion that it is a safety hazard. Although Alderman Healy, I must say, I can't wait for the runners to come down the prairie path so they can stop the traffic so I can get out on South Street, but it's a different reason. It's a confused area. I just noticed today that my son with his learner's permit was driving. We were waiting. I told him, wait till someone crosses the prairie path, you'll get out. The lights flashing, and a taxi cab went through before the two runners made it across. They stopped. So I can see a safety concern. That's just today, 6 o'clock. But I also hear what people are saying about Alderman Gutenkopf, how it ties into a larger plan in Alderman York. And that's why I asked the initial question. I don't know that the prairie path, and I use it probably as much or more than anyone on the council, and as I go all the way out, and I know the intersections where you could get killed, and I think it's Main Street, and a couple other ones. But it's a concern for the community. It's a concern for everyone who uses the prairie path. It's a major intersection. I'd like to see it get done. I don't want to spend the money on the engineering right now. I think it's premature. I'd like to hold it. So whether it gets zeroed out and we keep it alive, or we put it in and it goes to committee, as Alderman Deuter says, and then we have it available, I think that would be my preference. But and that's why I asked the initial question, if I vote to approve the funding, it doesn't mean it's spent. It has to go through the council for authority to do it. You're not going to sign a contract with an engineer until there's a decision to move this component forward. Because within the year, we may find that we want to move it forward, but personally, right now, I'm not in the position where I'd say Elmhurst should spend $1.2 million to put in an underpass that will benefit so many more people.
Alderman Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I must personally apologize for not getting this into the Public Works Committee sooner. Clearly, we had a lot of other things that I believe were higher priority, especially those related to stormwater and sanitary. So my position would be that we leave this in the budget and that we work to get this into the committee here within the next 60 to 90 days to properly vet this. And at that point in time, we can make a decision to go forward or not with the project. Hopefully by that time, we'll know a little bit more about what DuPage County is doing and have some data and some interaction with folks on public affairs and safety as to what this looks like in terms of making an improvement. Again, it's no commitment to spending the engineering dollars. We're just having it as a placeholder going forward, just like any other item in the budget would be. Thank you.
Okay. Leader. Alderman Leader.
I truly believe that the preservation of public safety is the main justification for civil government. Believing that, I want to go forward with this project, and I support Alderman Healy.
Any other comments or questions before we vote? Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to be brief. Just to address a couple of the concerns or comments made. Regarding the accident history, the one thing I can state unequivocally is that the 4 pedestrian accidents occurred at the Prairie Path. They didn't occur at South, they didn't occur at Seminole, they didn't occur at Vetlat. The 4 motor vehicle pedestrian accidents occurred at the Prairie Path. And I also appreciate Chairman Kennedy falling this on the sword about not bringing this up committee, but honestly, that was never the intention from our decision last year to postpone this a year. The council's direction to staff last year in postponing a year was A, to see if there was additional grant money available, and then B, to see if there was any stormwater. So there never was an intention that the committee would discuss this project before it was actually in the budget. So that was never the intention. As for safety improvements and what can we do, it's been 3 years. This project has been discussed for 3 years. Flashing yellow lights is as good as we've come up with. So I guess we can hope that something new comes along or that this study will show us something new, but I don't think so. Lastly, I really do understand the concern. This is a lot of money. But this is very important. It's a safety issue. Moving forward with the engineering gives the council additional time and staff additional time to listen and find out what the transportation study says. Listen and find out from county what additional funds they may have available. If we keep it in the budget, all we're doing is committing to engineering phase 1, which, by the way, the Public Works Committee will review and approve and send to council before we do it. So keeping in the budget buys us the time that I think people are looking for. Even if we get through phase 1 this year, and Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, this project isn't shovel ready for at least 18 months. The timeline for this project is 3 years. So if we delay it all we're doing is delaying yes or no. And lastly, and I said it during my first comments, we need to, right now, we either need to say kill it because we're not interested, because there's not a whole lot of new information we're going to get in the next 90 days, 100 days, 120 days. If this council really doesn't feel this is a worthwhile project, I think we should vote it down and take it out of the budget now, not waste any more staff time. But if we think there's a feasibility to this project and we're willing to wait to see what the county comes up with, and still have the opportunity, when the Phase 1 engineering report comes through, to say, you know what, before we actually cut a check, write a contract, we can kill it then. But I'm of the firm belief it's been over a year and a half. If we're really against this project, let's take it out now. But if we think it has merit, on what we know now, knowing that it can only get better, meaning we can only get additional grant money, let it move forward.
Alderman Dunn.
Question the city staff, the $125,000 for the study, is there any general use for anything learned in that should the project get canceled after the study? Is there any benefit incurred at all, or is that ultra specific to this project?
I don't think so. It's very specific to the design of the underpass.
Okay. Just one more thing. I had asked Deputy Chief Panico gave me some pedestrian motor vehicle accident data a little while ago for another issue, and from 2008 through 2011, those 4 years, there were 72 pedestrian vehicle accidents in town. And based on the current report, I'm seeing 2 at this Prairie Path location. One was a pedalist, and I don't know if those were included in Deputy Chief Panico's numbers. But unfortunately, we have pedestrian accidents throughout the town, throughout the city of Elmhurst, and as I stated, 72 of them, 2 of them were here. And I think we can improve safety in a lot of intersections, but I believe this is not the right fit, not the right approach to invest in this, given the city's contribution. And we have issues all throughout our town where pedestrians have had problems. So at this point, I don't think I could support this project moving forward. Thanks.
Okay, let's try to wrap this up. Alderman Bram?
Thank you. I would have to respectfully disagree with Alderman Healy in regards to what our next steps were for this last time we discussed this. I do appreciate, as he stated about me in the last topic, I do appreciate his passion on this issue. I'm not saying that there hasn't been, obviously in the past year, in 2012, there was a significant amount of accidents there, and that's cause for concern. I will say, though, that nobody seems to have any concern of where this mysterious $150,000 is coming from, when there was great concern of the same type of safety issue when it came to the previous item of concrete streets, of adding additional funding. I haven't heard on what we're cutting back to add additional $150,000 out of the capital improvement fund to do any basic engineering. I don't think at this time this is the right direction to go. I don't agree with Alderman Healy's comments that we should decide tonight to cut it for good or not. I think it does deserve correct and appropriate debate. It does deserve correct analysis from city staff on what, if any, additional improvements can be done. It is odd that 2013 there's been 1 accident, and I'm not saying 1 is acceptable, none is ideal, obviously. But it is interesting on how, for some reason, it's a cyclical area when it comes to accidents here, or I shouldn't say cyclical, up and down over the past few years. So I support the motion of no additional funding, at least at this time, until there's thorough debate.
Okay. Any additional comments or questions? Back to the motion. The removal of $125,000 out of line item 80-25 on page 157. Clerk Spencer.
150.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Bram.
Aye.
Hipscomb,
No.
York,
Aye.
Levin,
No.
Healy,
No.
Conquest,
Aye.
Kennedy,
No.
Mulliner absent, Wagner.
No.
And, let's see, where am I at now? Deuter,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Leader,
No.
Polumsky absent. I hope this is right. I have 6 ayes, 6 nays, and 2 absent.
6 ayes, 6 nays, 2 absent.
Want to use your lifeline?
I'd like to phone a friend. I'm not struck by my decision. I'm struck by the fact that we're in committee of the whole, and technically, well, if I had to cast my vote, I would say leave it in and let the committee hash it out and let the full council, who's not here, ultimately decide whether thumbs up or thumbs down. I think that's made pretty clear that putting the budget, dollars in the budget doesn't necessarily mean the spend, and I'd like to see the full committee. So I would say the will of the committee of the whole as it sits right now is to leave it in as is. Okay?
Did you just cast?
Yes, I cast my vote, yes. I'm a no for the motion, a yes to leave it in. And look forward to it coming out of committee. Okay, City Manager Grabowski. I do want to move on, even though it's 10:15, but as I ask you to move on to the next item, I also ask you to start thinking seriously about amending our, possibly amending our timeline, because I don't know how far we're going to get tonight. But I'm willing to stick it out. Let's see what happens. What do you know? We don't even have to turn the page. Page 157, circle back, sidewalk improvements, Alderman Dunn. City Manager Grabowski, do you want to?
Yes, Alderman Dunn had some questions regarding projects into the future, and I know engineering put together some information which was in the packet, and I believe implemented some additional information, some questions that Alderman Dunn had. So with that, I would just open it up for questions, or hopefully we've answered them and move forward.
Alderman Dunn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate City Engineer Taveri putting together a very thorough analysis on the sidewalk issue. I had asked her in a couple instances for some clarifications, and she came back with a very clear explanation of the timelines on normal sidewalk projects and the cost of those projects that were queued up. And right now, in the budget, we have $75,000, and based on the city engineer's estimate of the cost to do the next project in line, which is Comstock, that was estimated to be $175,000. And keep in mind, that is the city's initial cost, but we get back 50% of that over a 10-year period, should the project go forward. I would make a motion to increase that line item to more properly reflect the reasonable and practical figure of $175,000 for that particular line item, 8034, instead of the $75,000 that is shown there now.
What was the number again, Alderman Dunn?
$175,000.
175.
Which matches the city engineer's estimate. for the project.
Okay, comments or questions? Alderman Leader.
I second the motion.
There you go. Thanks for keeping me on track, Alderman Leader. We have a second for the motion. Fantastic. Any other additional comments? Alderman Dunn, Alderman Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel a Gladys sidewalk issue coming on a little bit. Why is this not, why wasn't it in the budget to begin with at 175? Is there an issue with Comstock? I'm not saying I'm against it, I'm just more curious than anything else. And that was actually before you were on the dais. I could rephrase the question, do we have full support on Comstock for a sidewalk?
I'll let city staff comment.
What's wrong with your computer? Sorry about that.
It's okay.
The 75 that's reflected in the budget was for the Howard work, which was 75,000. This came in obviously significantly more, and I guess we were anticipating doing the Howard Street sidewalk when the budget was put together. That's no longer the situation.
Real quick.
Alderman Wagner.
Do we foresee any issues or any surveys that have to go out to Comstock and have to get more than 80% to come back and say, yes, we want sidewalks?
Yes, Comstock will have to go through the whole process. At this point, they've just submitted a petition that met the city policy at that time. So the next step would be to do an informational open house for the neighborhood, and then it would be a city survey. So it would run through the normal process.
Alderman York.
The 175 is half the cost of the sidewalk then?
No, that's the total cost, and then we would recoup 50% from the residents.
Any other questions or comments? Alderman Hipskin.
Just to clarify that, so we're going to take the budget item up 100,000, go through the Comstock petition process, issue an SSA. After that, if it is cleared, the cost initially, what we are estimating is 175,000. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I had that right, and I support that.
Right, and then the cost would be recouped over a period of 10 years.
Right.
The SSA.
Thank you.
Alderman Bram.
Thank you. I'll just ask the same question that I did on the last budget line item. The majority of the council voted against increasing a safety issue of major potholes for concrete street re-asphalting, and requested where the biggest question I heard during those discussions was, we don't have the funds, don't know where those funds are coming from. We just approved something that we don't know where the funds are coming from with the York pedestrian underpass study. Here we're having another additional request of an additional $100,000. Where are the funds coming from? So I'm asking the question that was posed to me, albeit I didn't think it was appropriate to me, but turnaround's fair play. So where are these additional $100,000 coming from? I guess I would ask Alderman Dunn, since he's the elected official making the motion to amend.
Alderman Dunn.
Well, I can respond to that. I believe that would be taken out of fund balance. Just to clarify the comparison, where we're paving streets is a project that's based on miles, and it's a continuum that you can add or subtract miles. It's not a binary event, all or nothing. A sidewalk project is all or nothing. If the city supports
sidewalks, and I think we do, because if you look at some of our principles, promoting the community, sustainability, safety, healthy living, and pedestrian-friendly environment, they're all in line with promoting this type of investment. And if you look at some of our plans and documentation, our downtown plan is hitting on those same issues, where we're looking at encouraging all modes of transportation, such as walking and biking, that in our, as far as sustainability goes, we call out in our comprehensive plan that construction of additional sidewalks could ensure that all of Elmhurst could choose to walk or ride. So it's something, I think, in line with our philosophy, our guidelines, and so I think it's something that we want to do, we need to do. We have not, we funded Babcock in 2006, Babcock Street, Dorchester in 2007, Belden in 2008, Willow 2009, Gladys 2010, because of our philosophy as a city, and because of budget constraints, we did not fund anything in 2011, 12, or 13. So to keep us on track, not even make up ground, but to keep us one sidewalk per year, we would need to adjust this line item to make that happen.
Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think we just can't keep having this same, arguments about where the money's coming from. The money for the project that we last talked about was in the capital budget, and it comes from revenue sources that fund that. So even though I didn't happen to vote against, or I did vote against that one, I know where the money is coming from, so I don't think we can keep talking about that all night long. With an accounting question, I guess, is the 175 is the entire project cost, and if it were to happen, then we would obviously recoup half of that from the residents. Is that not handled like other things too, where there's kind of, for lack of a better word, a note payable set up over the 10 years, or is it all taken out of the budget is an expense this period when it really should only be an expense of half the amount and a payable set up for the other part? Just a quick accounting question.
Off the rails at 10:25.
No, we do expense the whole thing, and it is over 10 years that the resident is going to pay it back through property tax.
Right.
So it's just every year when that property tax comes in, those revenues, quote, that property tax revenue is going into in this case, the capital improvement fund. The capital improvement fund is fronting the money.
Okay.
Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The estimate on this project is $175,000, is what Corey Tiberi said. Should we go through the process with the residents and it's a decision to go with the project, we're going to spend the $175 anyway, because that's the way the program has been set up to be. So I say we go with putting $175 in the budget. We understand what happens when we go through the petition process, and if it gets through all those hurdles, then we spend the money. If it doesn't, then the money remains in the budget till next year. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Alderman Healy?
I don't know if either Alderman Dunn knows this or staff knows this. Were there any pedestrian accidents on either one of those blocks? And if so, would those be considered acceptable? Withdraw my question.
Point taken. Looking for final comments? Any final comments?
I heard there were. It's several town meetings.
Alderman Bram.
Yeah, in all due respect to Alderman York, I will continue to ask where the money's coming from because that was posed to me. I do actually feel for Alderman Dunn in this case because the postponement he mentioned in those lean years impacted the third ward as well greatly. Howard was delayed yet again because of those for 2 years because of that. So I do feel for the plight and your request. But like I said before, turnaround's fair play. And if you actually look at the priority, and priority A is classified as essential and immediate need, and priority B is essential but may be delayed, new sidewalks is priority B. Concrete street reconstruction is priority A. To Alderman Healy, I think the York Underpass was part of an item that was priority A. So that's why I think it is essential to address the fact of where is this $100,000 coming from, and if the council deems just out of fund balance, then so be it. But I think that's hypocritical to what was posed to me of what I deem to be an equal, if not greater, safety issue in previous discussions. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. This is just I think, a clarifying question for staff. If staff had known that the sidewalk project that was blocked was going to be blocked when the time the budget was prepared, would they have put in the 175 to do Comstock, or is there a different way that that project would have been funded?
Well, it all comes out of the capital improvement fund. So it's just a matter of either reprioritizing or taking out of the fund balance. Assuming that the council wanted to continue with sidewalks, then yes, we would have put the 175 in for the next project in the queue, so to speak.
And this would be the next project in the queue. So moving that up into the queue, if you'd known that, would have meant that you would have found the money to put this into the budget so that that project could get done.
Right, but understanding that as we project those projects and the fund balance, you see in 2018 that our fund balance gets relatively low for capital improvements.
Any other comments before we vote? Alderman Gutenkopf.
I'm still stuck on the funding question because it seemed to be such a concern over adding additional money to pave roads, and I still think it's a concern adding additional money for the sidewalks. I actually think we should move forward with this sidewalk. These people passed that petition in 2009, and they've been kind of waiting all this time. But I'm not real comfortable with that sort of offhand, we're just going to take it out of the capital improvement or the fund balance money. I do want to at least hear from the finance committee, or the finance director, I apologize, the finance director about how the balance sheet works when we add this extra $100,000 into this line.
Marilyn, you want to answer that question?
On on page 6, the capital improvement fund, I'm sorry, the capital expenditure budget. 2/3 of the way down that page, it says fund balance current year. Our concern, the 2014 year, yes, there's 4.5 million sitting there. Most of that's designated as to be spent in the following years. You can see as we project out to 2017, 2018, you're getting down to 350, 400,000. That's getting pretty low because then you don't have any room in case there is some major project that comes along. And as we all know, we have stormwater projects yet to be funded. It comes down to prioritization of the projects, and that's the council decision.
Alderman Healy.
Call the question.
Any objections?
Object.
You had a vote on calling the question.
Technically, I need a second then. I thought we were going to, a second on call the question. And then I think I need 2/3. Second by Alderman Hipskin. Before I ask for the vote, does that sound right to you, Alderman Levin? I think it's 2/3 vote. It's not simple majority
I
on
think
call
it's
the question.
non-debatable, and it's,
I don't have, my book's in my office. Does 2/3 work for you, Alderman Bram?
I think it's 2/3. I don't recall either. It is non-debatable.
All right, so we're going to call the question, and how many we got here, 12? So we need 8, is that right? We're going to go with that? Okay, great, call the question. Patty, Clerk Spencer, please call the roll on, I guess you call it putting the question.
All right.
There was a motion by Alderman Healy, second by Alderman Hipskin. This is to
Wait.
call the question.
Oh, for call the question,
Yeah.
okay, and it was, I'm sorry,
Healy and then Hipskin.
I have to do a roll call on
Yes.
this? All right, just here. Healy,
Aye.
Hipskin,
Aye.
York,
Aye.
Levin,
aye.
Conquist,
Aye.
Kennedy.
You have to speak up loud.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kennedy. Kennedy?
Aye.
Mulliner, absent. Wagner,
Aye.
Gutenkopf,
No.
Deuter,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Leader,
Aye.
Polumsky is absent. Bram?
No.
2. Okay, 10 ayes, 2 nays, 2 absent.
10 ayes, 2 nays. Call the question carries. Clerk Spencer, please call the roll on the underlying motion or the original motion from Alderman Dunn, which is to change line item 8025 on page 157 from, I'm sorry, 8034, 8034 on page 157, change it from 175 to 175. Is that correct, Alderman Dunn? Yes. Yeah, from 75 to 175.
Okay.
And the motion was Alderman Dunn, and I don't know.
Leader
Okay.
second.
Great.
Okay, Dunn,
Aye.
Leader,
Aye.
Polumsky, absent. Bram,
No.
Hipskin,
Aye.
York,
Aye.
Levin,
Aye.
Healy,
Aye.
Conquist,
Aye.
Kennedy,
Aye.
Mulliner, absent. Wagner,
Aye.
Gutenkopf,
No.
Deuter.
Aye.
All right, 10 ayes, 2 nays, 2 absent.
10 ayes, 2 nays, that motion carries. We're done with that circle back item. City Manager Grabowski, have you given thought to my earlier?
I have.
Okay, great. What do you say?
Certainly, we can continue this to the second,
Okay?
and have committee of the whole on the second, and hopefully wrap things up then, and then ask for consideration on the 16th.
Okay. That work for everybody? Yes, sir. Motion to adjourn. Alderman York, second by Alderman Levin. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.